The mop hit the marble floor with a wet slap, and Janet Washington flinched at the sound. She always flinched. 23 floors up in the Sterling Heights corporate tower, she moved like a ghost through hallways that cost more than her entire neighborhood. Her red maintenance uniform hung loose on her thin frame. 3 years of grief had hollowed her out, carved away the woman who used to laugh easily, who used to sing while cooking Sunday dinner, who used to tuck a small girl into bed every single night. That girl was gone now. Kimberly, age 7. Leukemia. The disease had eaten through her baby like acid, and Janet had watched every horrifying moment, powerless, broke, desperate. She'd sold everything. She'd begged. She'd prayed until her knees bled and her voice went hoarse. None of it mattered. The hospital bills still came. Her daughter still died. And Janet still had to wake up every morning and pretend the world made sense. She was cleaning the executive floor when she heard the screaming. It wasn't the normal corporate chaos, the rushed phone calls and clacking keyboards. This was primal. A child's rage, raw and terrifying. Janet's hands froze on the mop handle. She knew that sound. She'd heard it in hospital corridors when Kimberly fought the nurses, when the pain became too much, when a 7-year-old's body couldn't understand why it was betraying her. The screaming grew louder. Glass shattered. A woman's voice pleaded, high and panicked. Then the executive suite door burst open and 2 women in expensive clothes ran out, one bleeding from a scratch on her cheek, both looking like they'd barely escaped with their lives. "I can't do this," one gasped, mascara streaming down her face. "I don't care what he's paying. That child is disturbed." They rushed past Janet without seeing her. She was always invisible to people like them. The janitor. The help. The woman who cleaned up other people's messes and never complained because she needed every dollar to pay off the medical debt that would follow her to her grave. More crashing sounds came from inside the suite. Janet should have walked away. Should have pushed her cart to the next floor, finished her shift, gone home to her empty apartment where Kimberly's room sat untouched, a shrine to a little girl who loved butterflies and strawberry ice cream and terrible knock-knock jokes. But her feet moved toward the noise instead. She found the child in the center of the massive office, surrounded by broken glass and overturned furniture. A girl maybe 8 years old with dark curls wild around her face. She wore a beautiful lavender dress that probably cost more than Janet's monthly rent. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her eyes held something worse than sadness. They held emptiness. The kind of void Janet saw in her own mirror every morning. The girl grabbed a crystal paperweight from the desk. "Tessa, no." A man's voice, deep and exhausted. The billionaire himself, Harrison Bradford, stood in the doorway looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. His expensive navy suit was rumpled, his silver-touched dark hair disheveled. "Please, sweetheart. Put it down." Tessa raised the paperweight higher, aimed at the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city below. Janet didn't think. Her hand went to her pocket, to the small music box she carried everywhere, the one Kimberly had loved. She wound the key. The tinkling melody filled the room, soft and sweet. Brahms' Lullaby. The same song Janet had sung every night for 7 years, even in the hospital when Kimberly's eyes had started to dim, when her baby girl had whispered, "Sing it again, Mama." One more time. The paperweight slipped from Tessa's fingers. It hit the carpet with a muffled thud. The little girl's head turned slowly toward the sound of the music, toward Janet standing there in her janitor's uniform with her broken heart on display in the form of a cheap plastic music box that had somehow survived when nothing else had. For the first time in 6 months, according to what Janet would later learn, Tessa Bradford looked at another human being and actually saw them. Can you imagine losing the one person who made you whole, then watching another child suffer the same emptiness? If this story touches your heart, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever met someone who changed everything with a single moment of kindness? Janet Washington had perfected the art of disappearing. At 34 years old, she moved through the Sterling Heights corporate tower like morning mist, cleaning up after people who never looked down long enough to notice her face. The red maintenance uniform was her invisibility cloak. The mop and bucket her tools of erasure. She preferred it this way. Being seen meant questions, and questions meant having to explain why her eyes always looked wet, why her hands shook when she passed the children's clothing store on her bus route home, why she sometimes forgot to eat for days. The tower was 73 floors of glass and steel and money. So much money it made the air taste different. Janet worked the executive floors, where the carpets were softer and the trash cans held the remnants of meals that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She'd been doing this for 2 years, ever since the medical bills had crushed any hope of a normal life. Before Kimberly got sick, Janet had been studying to be a teacher. She'd been good at it too, the way she could make kids laugh while they learned, how she'd turn math problems into stories and history into adventures. But cancer didn't care about dreams. The disease had eaten through their savings first, then her college fund, then any chance of finishing her degree. Now she cleaned bathrooms for executives who couldn't be bothered to learn her name. The music box in her pocket pressed against her hip as she worked. She carried it everywhere. Sometimes, late at night in her apartment, she'd wind it up and let the melody fill the silence. It was the only thing that made Kimberly feel close. That and the drawing still taped to the refrigerator, the little girl with butterfly wings Janet had sketched so many times, the stick figure family that would never be whole again. She was scrubbing a conference room on the 68th floor when Rebecca Torres, Mr. Bradford's assistant, found her. Rebecca was mixed race, her Chinese and Puerto Rican heritage giving her striking features that always looked polished and professional. She wore a crisp green blazer and carried herself with the confidence of someone who belonged in these spaces. Unlike Janet. "Excuse me," Rebecca said, her voice gentle. "Are you Janet Washington?" Janet looked up, surprised to be addressed by name. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Bradford would like to speak with you. It's about what happened this morning with his daughter." Fear shot through Janet's chest. Had she done something wrong? Was she being fired for interfering? The bills stacked up in her mind, the rent due next week, the payment plan with the hospital that would take decades to finish. "Am I in trouble?" she asked quietly. Rebecca's expression softened. "No. Quite the opposite. Please follow me." The executive suite was bigger than Janet's entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sprawling below, tiny cars and people living their tiny lives. Harrison Bradford sat behind a massive desk made of dark wood that probably cost more than a car. He stood when Janet entered, and she realized he was tall, maybe 6'3", with broad shoulders and tired eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Ms. Washington," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit down." Janet perched on the edge of the leather chair, her cleaning supplies suddenly feeling very out of place. Harrison sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I want to thank you for what you did this morning," he began. "Those women were Tessa's 9th and 10th nannies in 6 months. Before them we tried 8 others. We've gone through 9 child therapists. Nothing works. She won't speak, won't eat properly, won't sleep through the night. The doctors say she's processing grief, that she needs time. But I'm watching my daughter disappear and I don't know how to stop it." His voice cracked on the last word. This billionaire, this man who could buy anything in the world, looked as broken as Janet felt. "Her mother died," Janet said softly. "It wasn't a question. 8 months ago. Car accident. Tessa was in the back seat. She saw everything." Harrison's hands clenched together. "Since then she's been lost. Until this morning. Until you." Janet's throat tightened. "I didn't do anything special. Just played a music box. You reached her when no one else could." Harrison looked at her directly, and Janet felt seen for the first time in years. "Ms. Washington, I know this is highly unusual, but I'd like to offer you a position as Tessa's nanny. Full-time. Live-in if you're willing. Name your price." The room tilted. Janet gripped the arms of the chair. "Mr. Bradford, I'm not qualified. I don't have training in child psychology or education. I'm just a janitor." "You're a mother?" he said simply. "I had you looked into after this morning. I know about Kimberly. I'm so very sorry for your loss." The grief hit fresh, the way it always did when someone spoke her daughter's name out loud. Janet's eyes burned. "I can't," she whispered. "I wouldn't know what to do. You already did it this morning. You saw my daughter when everyone else saw a problem." Harrison pulled out a folder. "I'm offering you $200,000 a year. Full benefits. Your medical debt paid off in full. A suite in our home with anything you need. All I'm asking is that you try to reach her the way you did today. $200,000. Her medical debt gone." The crushing weight that made every breath feel like drowning lifted. Janet thought about the apartment where Kimberly's room waited, the bills that never stopped coming, the future that looked like decades of scrubbing toilets and being invisible. She thought about the emptiness in Tessa's eyes, so much like the emptiness Janet carried. "I'll need to give 2 weeks' notice to maintenance," she heard herself say. Harrison shook his head. "I'll handle that. You can start tomorrow. Rebecca will help you with everything you need." He extended his hand. "Thank you, Ms. Washington. You have no idea what this means to me." Janet shook his hand, his grip warm and steady. "Call me Janet. And thank you for this opportunity. I'll do my best for Tessa." As she left the office, music box still in her pocket, Janet felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Not quite hope, but maybe its distant cousin. The possibility that broken things could find purpose, that pain could transform into something that mattered. Rebecca walked her out, already making calls and arrangements. "You're going to need new clothes," she said cheerfully. "And we'll set up your suite today. Mr. Bradford's home is in the penthouse, floors 71 through 73. You'll have the entire guest wing." Janet nodded, overwhelmed. Yesterday she'd been scrubbing toilets. Tomorrow she'd be living in a penthouse, caring for a child who'd lost everything, working for a man who understood that kind of loss. She rode the elevator down, watching the floor numbers descend. When she reached the ground level and stepped out into the lobby, she caught her reflection in the polished marble. The woman staring back looked different somehow. Still tired, still grieving, still carrying more pain than any person should have to bear. But maybe, just maybe, she looked a little less invisible. That night, in her small apartment, Janet packed her few belongings. She stood in Kimberly's doorway, looking at the butterfly drawings on the walls, the stuffed animals arranged on the bed, the little shoes lined up in the closet that would never be worn again. "I'm going to help a little girl," she whispered to the empty room. "She's lost like me. I think you'd want me to try." The music box sat on the dresser. Janet wound it up one last time in this place, letting Brahms' lullaby fill the space where so much love and sorrow had lived. Tomorrow would bring change, would bring a new child who needed someone to see past her pain. Janet wiped her eyes and started taking down the drawings. She'd bring them with her. Kimberly's butterflies would fly in new spaces, would remind her why kindness mattered, why love persisted even when it hurt. The phone rang. Rebecca, confirming arrangements. "Everything's ready for you," the assistant said warmly. "Welcome to the team, Janet. Welcome to the team." As if she belonged somewhere again. As if she mattered. Janet finished packing as night fell over the city. Somewhere high above, in a tower of glass and wealth, a little girl named Tessa was hopefully getting ready for bed, hopefully dreaming of something better than the nightmares that had haunted her for 8 months. Tomorrow they would try to heal together. 2 broken hearts, 1 impossible hope, and a music box that refused to forget how to sing. The penthouse elevator required a special key card that Rebecca handed over with a reassuring smile. Janet clutched her single suitcase, feeling more nervous than she had in years. The elevator rose so smoothly she barely felt the motion, just watched the floor numbers climb higher and higher until they reached 71. The doors opened directly into the Bradford home and Janet's breath caught. She'd cleaned luxury apartments before, but this was different. The entire floor was an open living space with windows on every side, the city spread below like a blanket of lights. The furniture was modern but comfortable, deep blue sofas and chairs arranged around a stone fireplace. Real artwork hung on the walls, the kind Janet had only seen in museums. Harrison Bradford stood near the windows, still wearing his navy suit from earlier. He turned when the elevator chimed. "Janet," he said, crossing to meet her. "Welcome. Let me show you around." He took her suitcase despite her protests and led her through the space. The main floor held the kitchen, living areas, a library lined with books and Harrison's study. A curved staircase led to the upper floors. "Tessa's room is on 72, Harrison explained as they climbed. "Mine is on 73. Your suite is here, next to Tessa's." He opened a door to reveal an apartment within an apartment. A large bedroom with an attached bathroom, a sitting area with a small kitchen, even a balcony overlooking the city. The walls were painted a soft cream color, the bedding a rich maroon that looked expensive and inviting. Fresh flowers sat on the dresser, and the closet was already stocked with clothes in Janet's size. "Rebecca took the liberty of arranging some things," Harrison said, looking almost embarrassed. "If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, please tell her. We want you to be comfortable." Janet walked slowly through the space, touching the soft fabric of the curtains, the smooth surface of the desk. It was bigger than her entire apartment had been. The bathroom had a soaking tub and a shower with multiple heads. Fluffy towels hung on heated racks. She'd never seen anything like it. "Mr. Bradford," she began. "Harrison," he interrupted gently. "Please. I think we're past formalities." "Harrison," she tried, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "This is too much. I don't need all this." "Yes, you do," he said firmly. "If you're going to help Tessa, you need to be rested and comfortable. Consider it part of the job." Before Janet could respond, a small sound came from the hallway. They both turned to see Tessa standing in her doorway, wearing pajamas covered in stars. Her dark curls were damp from a bath, her eyes cautious but curious. She looked at Janet, Then at the music box Janet had set on the dresser. "Hi Tessa," Janet said softly, crouching down to the girl's level. "Remember me from this morning?" Tessa didn't speak, but she took one step forward, then another. She stopped a few feet away, staring at the music box. "Would you like to hear it again?" Janet asked. A tiny nod. Janet picked up the music box and wound the key. The familiar melody filled the room. Tessa's shoulders relaxed, her face softening. She took another step closer, then another, until she was standing right next to Janet. Harrison watched from the doorway, his expression a mix of wonder and pain. Janet could see how much he loved his daughter, how her silence must have been killing him slowly. "This was my little girl's favorite," Janet said, keeping her voice low and calm. "Her name was Kimberly. She loved butterflies and music boxes and stories. I used to sing this song to her every night." Tessa looked up at Janet's face, really looked, searching for something. "She got very sick," Janet continued, her heart squeezing. "And she had to go to heaven. I miss her every single day. But you know what helps? Remembering the good times. Remembering how she smiled, how she laughed, how she loved life even when things got hard." A single tear rolled down Tessa's cheek. Then another. She didn't make a sound, but her small body shook with suppressed sobs. Janet opened her arms, a question not a demand, and after a moment's hesitation, Tessa collapsed into them. The little girl cried silently against Janet's shoulder while the music box played its gentle song. Harrison stood frozen, tears streaming down his own face. Janet just held Tessa, rocking her slowly, letting her release the grief she'd been holding in for 8 months. "It's okay to miss her," Janet whispered. "It's okay to be sad. Your mama loved you so much and that love doesn't go away. It stays right here." She placed a hand over Tessa's heart. "Forever." Tessa's arms wrapped around Janet's neck, holding on like she was drowning, and Janet was the only solid thing in a violent ocean. They stayed that way until the music box wound down, until Tessa's tears slowed, until the little girl's breathing evened out into sleep. Janet carefully stood, lifting Tessa's weight. "Which room?" she mouthed to Harrison. He led her across the hall to Tessa's bedroom. It was beautiful, painted in soft purple with a canopy bed and shelves full of toys that looked barely touched. Photos covered one wall, and Janet's chest ached when she saw them. A woman with warm brown skin and kind eyes, holding a laughing Tessa. Mother and daughter at the beach, at a park, baking cookies. The life they'd had before everything shattered. Janet laid Tessa in bed and pulled up the covers. The little girl's eyes fluttered open for a moment. "Stay," Tessa whispered, the first word Janet had heard her speak. "I'm right next door," Janet promised. "And I'll be here when you wake up. I'm not going anywhere." Tessa's fingers clutched the blanket. "Mama Janet?" The words hit Janet like a physical blow. She glanced at Harrison, who nodded, his eyes wet. "If you want," Janet said softly. "I'd be honored." Tessa's eyes drifted closed again. Janet sat by the bed until she was certain the girl was deeply asleep, then carefully stood and joined Harrison in the hallway. He leaned against the wall, looking exhausted and grateful and overwhelmed all at once. "She hasn't said a word in 6 months, he said hoarsely. "The doctors said she might never speak again. They said the trauma was too severe. Sometimes grief needs the right person to witness it," Janet said. "Someone who understands the weight." Harrison looked at her with an intensity that made Janet's pulse quicken. "I meant what I said earlier. Name your price. Whatever you need, it's yours." Janet thought about the offer, the money, the debt that would disappear. Part of her still felt like an imposter, like she'd wake up tomorrow back in her old apartment with this all being a dream. But Tessa's whispered "Mama Janet" had felt real. The little girl's pain had felt real. "I just want to help her," Janet said. "Everything else, the salary and the debt payment, that's more generous than I can express. But the reason I'm doing this is because I see my Kimberly in her eyes. I couldn't save my daughter, but maybe I can help yours." "Our daughter?" Harrison said softly. "If you're going to be here, if you're going to help her heal, then she's ours to protect together." The word "ours" did something strange to Janet's heart. She'd been alone for so long, carrying her grief like a secret burden. The idea of sharing the load, of having a partner and helping a child heal, felt both terrifying and comforting. "I should let you rest," Harrison said, though he didn't move. "Tomorrow will be a big day. Rebecca will go over Tessa's schedule, her preferences, everything you'll need to know." "Harrison," Janet said before he could leave, "why did you really hire me? There are professional nannies with credentials and experience. Why someone like me?" He met her eyes directly. "Because when you looked at my daughter this morning, You didn't see a problem to fix or a paycheck to earn. You saw a child in pain and you responded with kindness. That's not something you can train. That's who you are. He turned and walked toward the staircase to the upper floor. Janet stood in the hallway for a long moment, processing everything that had happened in a single day. This morning she'd been invisible, scrubbing floors and counting down the hours until she could go home and cry in private. Tonight, she stood in a penthouse wearing borrowed clothes, having been called Mama by a grieving child, and accepted into a life she couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. She went to her new suite and unpacked her single suitcase. The few clothes she owned looked shabby against the luxury of the closet, but she hung them carefully anyway. She placed Kimberly's drawings on the dresser, arranged the music box next to them, and set up the small frame with her daughter's last school photo. The city lights glittered through the windows. Somewhere below, people were living normal lives, facing normal problems. Up here, Janet was stepping into something extraordinary. Scary, yes. Overwhelming, absolutely. But also maybe the beginning of healing she'd thought was impossible. She changed into her worn pajamas and climbed into bed. The mattress was so soft she almost felt like she was floating. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the penthouse, so different from the noise of her old apartment building. A soft sound made her turn. Tessa stood in the doorway clutching a stuffed rabbit. Bad dream? Janet asked gently. Tessa nodded. Janet pulled back the covers. Want to sleep here tonight? Another nod. The little girl climbed into the big bed and Janet wrapped an arm around her. Tessa curled against her side, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Tell me about Kimberly, Tessa whispered. So Janet did. She talked about her daughter's love of butterflies, how she'd insisted on wearing her tutu to the grocery store, how she'd made up songs about everything from breakfast cereal to clouds. She talked about the hard parts too, the hospital stays, the fear, the final goodbye. But I'm glad I got to be her mama, Janet finished. Even though it hurt to lose her, I wouldn't trade those 7 years for anything. Love is worth the pain. My mama said that too, Tessa murmured, her voice drowsy. She said loving me was her greatest adventure. She was right, Janet said. And she's still loving you, sweetie. From wherever she is, she's watching over you and wanting you to be happy. Tessa's breathing slowed into sleep. Janet held her close, this child who'd been a stranger this morning and now felt like a lifeline. Maybe they could help each other. Maybe broken people could build something beautiful together. The music box sat on the dresser, catching the city lights. Janet closed her eyes and let herself hope, just a little, that tomorrow would be better than yesterday. That healing was possible, that love could grow in the spaces grief had hollowed out. In the penthouse above, Harrison Bradford lay awake, thinking about the janitor who'd become his daughter's salvation. About the way she'd held Tessa with such tender understanding. About the possibility that maybe, just maybe, his family could feel whole again. The city slept beneath its blanket of stars. 3 grieving hearts found rest, pulled together by circumstances and music boxes and the stubborn persistence of hope. Morning light filled the penthouse, soft and golden. Janet woke to find Tessa still curled beside her, small face peaceful in sleep. For a moment, Janet's heart seized. This was how Kimberly used to look on lazy Saturday mornings, before the world woke up and demanded things of them. But Tessa wasn't Kimberly. She was her own person, her own story. Janet had to remember that. She carefully slid out of bed and got dressed in one of the new outfits Rebecca had provided, a comfortable pair of jeans and a bright green sweater. The clothes fit perfectly. In the bathroom, she found luxury toiletries and makeup she'd never be able to afford on her own. It all felt surreal. Tessa woke as Janet was brushing her hair. Morning, Janet said with a smile. Want some breakfast? The girl nodded and followed Janet downstairs. The kitchen was enormous, all marble counters and stainless steel appliances. Janet felt intimidated until Rebecca appeared, carrying a tablet and looking efficient in a red blazer. Good morning, Rebecca said warmly. I thought I'd go over Tessa's routine while we eat. Harrison already left for the office, but he'll be home by 6. They made pancakes together, Tessa watching quietly from a bar stool. Janet tried not to think about how the ingredients probably cost more than her old weekly grocery budget. She focused instead on making the shapes Kimberly had loved, butterflies and stars and hearts. Tessa's eyes widened when Janet placed the butterfly pancake in front of her. She looked up at Janet with something like wonder. My Kimberly loved these, Janet said, sitting beside her. She'd always eat the wings first, then the body. Said it made the butterfly's spirit fly free. Tessa picked up her fork and carefully cut off one wing, then the other before eating them slowly. Her lips quirked in what might have been the start of a smile. Rebecca watched with barely concealed amazement. She hasn't eaten breakfast without a fight in months. They spent the morning going over Tessa's schedule. Online school 3 hours a day, occupational therapy twice a week, appointments with therapists who probably charged more per hour than Janet used to make in a week. It was overwhelming. What does Tessa like to do? Janet asked. For fun, I mean. Rebecca flipped through her notes. Before her mother died, she loved art. Painting, drawing, crafts. She hasn't touched any of it since the accident. Janet looked at Tessa, who was pushing pancake pieces around her plate. Want to make something with me today? We could draw or paint or build something. Tessa hesitated, then nodded once. They set up in the library, which had a large table perfect for crafts. Janet found paper and colored pencils and just started drawing. She didn't ask Tessa to participate, didn't push. She just created, letting the familiar comfort of art settle over her. She drew butterflies, of course. Dozens of them in different colors and sizes. Some realistic, some fantastical. She narrated as she worked. This one is a monarch, she said. They migrate thousands of miles. Can you imagine? Such tiny creatures traveling so far. They're brave butterflies. Delicate but determined. Tessa watched, her small face intent. After 20 minutes, she reached for a pencil. Janet's heart jumped, but she kept her expression neutral, just kept drawing her own pictures. Tessa drew slowly, carefully. When she finished, she pushed the paper toward Janet. It was a woman with butterfly wings standing next to a smaller figure also with wings. They were holding hands. Is this you and your mama? Janet asked softly. Tessa nodded. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from the drawing. It's beautiful, Janet said. You know what I think? I think she has those wings now. I think she can fly anywhere, see anything. And most of all, I think she flies close to you, watching over you, keeping you safe. Do you think Kimberly has wings too? Tessa whispered. I know she does, Janet said. And I bet she and your mama are friends up there. Bet they're teaching each other their favorite songs and games. Tessa picked up another pencil and started drawing again. This time she made 4 figures with wings. Too big, too small. She labeled them in shaky letters. Mama Catherine, Kimberly, me, Mama Janet. Janet's eyes burned with tears. She pulled Tessa into a hug. Thank you, sweetie. This is the most special thing anyone's ever given me. They drew together for hours, creating a whole world of butterflies and winged people in bright colors. When Harrison came home that evening, he found them covered in marker and glitter glue, laughing over a particularly lopsided butterfly Tessa had made. He stopped in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes got wet and he had to turn away for a moment. Daddy, Tessa said, her voice small but clear. Come draw with us. Harrison looked at Janet, who smiled and nodded. He sat down at the table, loosening his tie. What should I draw? Mama, Tessa said. Draw Mama Catherine. For a moment, Janet thought he might refuse. The pain on his face was sharp enough to cut. But he picked up a pencil and started sketching. His hands shook at first, then steadied. The woman who emerged on the paper was beautiful, laughing, full of life. She was wonderful, Harrison said quietly. She made everything better just by being in the room. Smart, funny, kind. She volunteered at the community garden downtown every weekend, taught kids how to grow vegetables. She believed in making the world better, one small action at a time. She sounds amazing, Janet said. She was. Harrison set down the pencil. I didn't think I'd ever be able to draw her again. Thank you. Tessa climbed into her father's lap, something Janet suspected she hadn't done in months. Mama Janet is helping me remember the good parts, she said. Not just the scary parts. Harrison held his daughter close, his eyes meeting Janet's over Tessa's head. In his gaze, Janet saw gratitude and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. But she looked away, focusing on cleaning up the art supplies. They ordered dinner from a restaurant Janet had never heard of, fancy Thai food that arrived in real dishes, not takeout containers. They ate together at the dining table, and Tessa chattered about the butterflies they'd drawn, about a book she wanted to read, about maybe going to the park tomorrow. It felt almost normal. Almost like a family. After Tessa went to bed, Janet and Harrison sat in the library, the butterfly drawings spread between them. I can't thank you enough, Harrison said. In 2 days, you've done what an army of professionals couldn't do in 8 months. I just see her, Janet said simply. Really see her, not as a patient or a problem, but as a little girl who lost her world. Because you understand that loss, Harrison said. I'm sorry you had to experience it. Sorry anyone does. Me too. Janet traced the edge of one of Tessa's drawings. But maybe that pain has a purpose. Maybe it helps me help her. Harrison leaned forward. Tell me about Kimberly, if you want to. I'd like to know more about her. So Janet talked. She told him about her daughter's quirks and dreams, about the 7 years of joy that had been stripped away by disease. She talked about the guilt of not being able to afford better treatment, about the crushing debt, about the emptiness of the apartment after Kimberly died. Harrison listened without interrupting, his dark eyes intent. When she finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. You gave her 7 years of love, he said firmly. That's what matters. Not the money, not the treatment options. The love. And now you're giving that same love to Tessa. You're extraordinary, Janet. His hand was warm, solid. Janet's breath caught. She pulled away gently, afraid of the feeling blooming in her chest. I should get some sleep, she said, standing. Big day tomorrow. Janet, Harrison called as she reached the doorway. I mean it. You're changing our lives. Don't ever forget that you matter. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and went upstairs. In her suite, she looked at the drawings taped to her wall, the beginning of a new collection alongside Kimberly's butterflies. She was building something here. A connection, a purpose, maybe even the start of healing. In Tessa's room across the hall, the little girl slept peacefully for the first time in months, dreaming of butterfly wings and the two mothers who loved her from different places. And in his own suite on the floor above, Harrison Bradford stared at the drawing of his wife and wondered if it was possible to fall in love with someone's kindness, their gentle strength, the way they made broken things beautiful again. The city lights glittered below. 3 hearts, slowly stitching themselves back together, one day at a time. The morning started with rain hammering against the penthouse windows, the kind of downpour that turned the city gray and gloomy. Janet woke to find Tessa already in her room, curled up in the armchair with the music box in her hands. Morning, sweetie, Janet said, sitting up. Couldn't sleep? Tessa shook her head. The rain sounds like the night Mama died. It was raining then too. Janet's heart squeezed. She patted the bed and Tessa climbed in beside her. Want to tell me about it? The little girl was quiet for a long time. Then haltingly she began. We were driving home from the community garden. Mama let me help plant tomatoes that day. I got all muddy and she laughed. She always laughed at stuff like that. Janet held Tessa's hand, giving her time. The car came out of nowhere, Tessa continued, her voice getting smaller. It was so loud. And then everything was spinning and Mama was screaming my name and then, quiet. So quiet. She wasn't moving and I couldn't make her wake up. I tried, Mama Janet. I tried so hard. Tears streamed down Tessa's face. Janet pulled her close. Oh honey, it wasn't your fault. You know that, right? There was nothing you could have done. Everyone says that, Tessa sobbed. But I should have helped her. I should have saved her. You were just a little girl, Janet said firmly. You were just a little girl. What happened was terrible and unfair, but it wasn't because of anything you did or didn't do. Tessa cried against Janet's shoulder, releasing the guilt she'd been carrying like stones in her pockets. Janet rocked her gently, humming the lullaby from the music box. You know what Kimberly used to say? Janet asked after a while. She'd say, Mama, I'm going to be a butterfly doctor when I grow up. I'd ask her what that meant, and she'd tell me that butterflies get their wings broken sometimes, and someone needs to fix them so they can fly again. She was only 7, but she understood that broken things could heal. Tessa pulled back to look at Janet's face. Did she get to be a butterfly doctor? In a way, Janet said. Before she died, she made me promise to help other kids. To tell them stories, to make them smile, to show them that even when life is scary, there's still beauty. So every time I help someone, every time I'm kind, I'm keeping that promise. I'm being a butterfly doctor too. Can I help? Tessa asked. Can I keep the promise with you? Janet's eyes filled with tears. I'd love that. We'll be butterfly doctors together. Tessa picked up the music box again, examining it closely. Why does this song make me feel better? Because your mama sang it to you, Janet said. Music has a way of holding memories, keeping them safe. Every time you hear it, you're connected to her love. Did Kimberly's music box look different? Actually, Janet said, pulling open the drawer of her nightstand, I have something to show you. She pulled out a folder of photos. Kimberly at different ages, always smiling despite the sickness slowly consuming her. In one picture, she held the music box, her thin arms barely able to grip it. She had leukemia, Janet explained. It's a cancer that attacks your blood. We tried everything, but it was too strong. The music box was her comfort during the hardest times. Tessa studied the photos carefully. She was pretty. And brave. So brave, Janet agreed. Just like you. I'm not brave, Tessa said. I've been so scared. I couldn't even talk. Being scared and being brave aren't opposites, Janet said. Being brave means feeling the fear and continuing anyway. You're talking now. You're drawing again. You're letting yourself heal. That's the bravest thing I can imagine. Tessa was quiet for a moment. Then she wound the music box key. The lullaby played, mixing with the sound of rain on the windows. Mama Catherine used to sing this too, Tessa said softly. Different words but same melody. She'd sing about stars and dreams and how much she loved me. Sing it for me, Janet encouraged. I'd love to hear it. Tessa's voice was small at first, hesitant. But as she sang, it grew stronger. The words were simple, beautiful. A mother's love song to her daughter, promising forever even when forever wasn't possible. Janet cried, but they were good tears. Healing tears. When Tessa finished, they sat together in the quiet, the music box still playing its gentle tune. Harrison found them like that an hour later. He'd stayed home from work because of Tessa's bad morning, and he stood in the doorway watching his daughter sing to Janet, the two of them surrounded by the soft glow of rainy morning light. Come here, Daddy, Tessa said, noticing him. Listen to Mama's song. She sang it again and Harrison's composure crumbled. He sank down on the bed with them and Tessa climbed into his lap, still holding the music box. Janet moved to give them space, but Harrison caught her hand. Stay, he said. Please. So they sat together, the three of them, while Tessa sang her mother's lullaby and the rain washed the city clean. It felt sacred this moment. Like they were building something important, fragile but real. Afterward they made breakfast together. Tessa wanted to help, so Janet taught her how to make scrambled eggs the way Kimberly had liked them, with cheese and little pieces of tomato. Harrison made coffee and toast, and they ate at the kitchen island like a real family. I was thinking, Janet said as they finished eating, what if we made a special project? Something to honor both your mama and Kimberly? Tessa's eyes lit up. What kind of project? A memory garden, Janet said. Not a real garden but an art one. We could paint and draw and create things that remind us of them. All the good memories, all the love. We could invite other kids who've lost people to join us. Make it something beautiful. Like Mama's community garden, Tessa said excitedly. But for feelings instead of vegetables. Harrison smiled. That's brilliant. We could set it up in the building's community room. I'll have Rebecca arrange it. Could we do it every week? Tessa asked. So kids have somewhere to go when they're sad? Absolutely, Harrison said. He looked at Janet with such warmth that she had to look away. This is exactly the kind of thing Catherine would have loved. Using pain to create something meaningful. They spent the rest of the morning planning. Tessa drew sketches of what the memory garden could look like, while Janet made lists of supplies and Harrison made phone calls to arrange the space. By afternoon, the rain had stopped and weak sunlight filtered through the clouds. Want to go to the real community garden? Harrison asked. The one Catherine worked at? I think it's time Tessa went back. Janet saw the fear flicker across Tessa's face, but also something else. Curiosity. Oh. Will you come with me, Mama Janet? Tessa asked. Of course, Janet said. I'll be right there the whole time. They drove through the clean streets, the city looking fresh after the rain. The garden was in a neighborhood that made Janet feel at home, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and kids played in the streets. It was run down but cared for, colorful murals on the walls and flower boxes on stoops. The garden itself was a small miracle in the middle of concrete. Raised beds full of vegetables, flowers blooming along the fence, a small seating area made from repurposed pallets. A few people worked among the plants, and they looked up when Harrison's expensive car pulled up. An older black woman with silver hair approached, her face breaking into a smile when she saw them. Harrison Bradford. Been too long, son. Mrs. Patterson, Harrison said warmly, hugging her. Good to see you. This is Janet Washington. She's helping with Tessa. And Tessa, you remember Mrs. Patterson. Child, you've grown, Mrs. Patterson said gently. Your mama would be so proud of how tall you are. Tessa hid behind Janet's legs. Mrs. Patterson didn't push, just smiled. Would you like to see the tomatoes you planted with your mama? She asked. They grew up strong just like you. Tessa nodded slowly. Mrs. Patterson led them to a bed of tomato plants heavy with fruit. These are from the seeds you two put in the ground. Your mama talked about you the whole time we worked. Said you were the best helper she ever had. Tessa reached out to touch a tomato, her small fingers gentle. Can we pick some? That's exactly what they're here for, Mrs. Patterson said, handing her a basket. They spent an hour in the garden. Tessa picked tomatoes and learned about the other vegetables. Janet helped weed a bed of carrots. Harrison talked with the other gardeners about expanding the space, about funding and supplies. This place was Catherine's dream, Harrison told Janet as they worked. She believed everyone deserved access to fresh food and green space. After she died, I couldn't come back. It hurt too much. What changed? Janet asked. You, he said simply. You showed me that avoiding pain doesn't make it go away. That sometimes you have to walk through it to get to the other side. Janet felt her cheeks warm. I just did what felt right. That's exactly why it worked, Harrison said. He held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Tessa ran up with her basket full of tomatoes. Look how many. Can we make spaghetti sauce like Mama used to? We absolutely can, Janet said. As they left, Mrs. Patterson pulled Janet aside. Thank you for bringing them back. That little girl needed to see that her mama's work continues, that the love doesn't stop just because the person is gone. I think we all needed it, Janet admitted. Driving home, Tessa fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted but peaceful. Harrison glanced at Janet in the passenger seat. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, he said quietly. For this to somehow fall apart. It feels too good to be real. It's real, Janet assured him. Healing is messy and hard, but it's possible. We're proof. We, Harrison repeated softly. I like the sound of that. Janet did too, though it terrified her. She'd built walls around her heart after Kimberly died, convinced she'd never feel anything but grief again. But here, with this man and his daughter, those walls were crumbling. They carried Tessa upstairs when they got home, putting her to bed still wearing her garden-dirty clothes. She clutched the music box even in sleep, a small smile on her face. Progress, Harrison whispered. So much progress, Janet agreed. They stood in the hallway between their rooms, neither wanting to say goodnight. Finally, Harrison reached out and tucked a strand of Janet's hair behind her ear. Thank you, he said. For everything. For seeing us. For caring. Janet's breath caught at the gentle touch. It's not hard to care about you both. The words hung between them, meaning more than they said. Harrison leaned closer and Janet's heart hammered. But then Tessa called out in her sleep and the moment broke. Good night, Janet, Harrison said, stepping back. Good night, she whispered. In her room, Janet touched the music box on her dresser. Kimberly's face smiled from the photo frame. I think I'm falling for them, she told her daughter's image. Is that okay? Does that mean I'm forgetting you? But she knew the answer. Love didn't diminish love. Hearts expanded to hold more, always more. Kimberly would want her to be happy, to live fully, to let herself heal. The city lights twinkled below. 3 hearts, growing closer every day, learning that love could bloom even in grief's shadow. Are you rooting for Janet and Harrison to find happiness together? Does Tessa's healing give you hope for your own struggles? Subscribe to follow their journey, and tell us in the comments about a time someone's kindness changed your life. The photograph appeared on social media 3 days later. Janet and Tessa in the park, feeding ducks at the pond. Tessa was laughing, Janet was smiling, both of them looking genuinely happy. It should have been a private moment. Instead, it became viral. The headline read, Billionaire's daughter raised by former janitor? Harrison Bradford's shocking childcare choice. Rebecca showed Janet the phone screen with an apologetic expression. They were in the library, Tessa doing schoolwork nearby. Janet felt her stomach drop as she read the comments. Why would he hire someone with no credentials? This is what happens when rich people try to be woke. That poor child deserves better than a cleaning lady playing nanny. The words hurt more than Janet expected. She'd known, of course, that people would judge, that her past would be used against her. But seeing it spelled out so cruelly made her hands shake. There's more, Rebecca said gently. She showed Janet another article, this one digging into her history. Kimberly's death. The medical debt. The fact that Janet had never finished her teaching degree. Every failure, every painful moment, laid out for the world to judge. The gossip sites are having a field day, Rebecca continued. They're calling it a scandal. Some are even suggesting inappropriate motives. Janet's face burned. What do you mean? They're implying you're taking advantage of Harrison. That you're some kind of gold digger who saw an opportunity with a vulnerable widower. Nausea rose in Janet's throat. She'd feared judgment about her credentials, but this was worse. They were twisting her kindness into something ugly, making her relationship with the Bradfords seem calculated and false. I should resign, Janet said quietly. I'm making things worse for you both. Absolutely not, Harrison's voice came from the doorway. He strode into the room, his expression thunderous. This is garbage journalism from people with nothing better to do than tear down decent people. But they're right about some things, Janet said. I'm not qualified. I don't have the background or education. Maybe Tessa would be better off with someone who knows what they're doing. Stop, Harrison said firmly. He took Janet's hands in his. You are exactly who Tessa needs. Credentials don't teach compassion. Degrees don't create connection. You've done more for my daughter in 2 weeks than an army of professionals did in 8 months. Tessa looked up from her work, noticing the tension. What's wrong? Harrison hesitated, but Janet decided honesty was better. Some people saw pictures of us and wrote some not very nice things. They don't think I should be taking care of you. Tessa's face crumpled. But why? You're the best thing that's happened since Mama died. Some people judge without understanding, Janet said gently. They see that I used to be a janitor and think that means I can't do other things. That's stupid, Tessa declared. You're smart and kind and you make me feel safe. That's what matters. Harrison smiled at his daughter, then looked at Janet with an intensity that made her pulse race. She's right. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. By that afternoon, Harrison had called a press conference. Janet begged him not to, but he insisted. I'm not letting them attack you without defending you. The conference was held in the building's main lobby, cameras and reporters packed into the space. Janet stood to the side with Rebecca, feeling like she might throw up. Harrison stood at a podium, looking every inch the powerful CEO. I'm here to address the recent speculation about my family, he began. 2 weeks ago, Janet Washington entered our lives and changed everything. My daughter, who had stopped speaking after losing her mother, is talking again. Laughing again. Engaging with the world. This transformation isn't because Janet has a fancy degree or years of experience. It's because she has something far more important. Genuine compassion. The reporters shouted questions, but Harrison held up a hand. Janet lost her own daughter 3 years ago. She understands grief in a way most people thankfully never will. When she looks at Tessa, she doesn't see a patient or a problem. She sees a child in pain who needs love and understanding. That's not something you can teach in a classroom. Mr. Bradford, one reporter called out. Isn't it true that Ms. Washington was hired directly from the janitorial staff? How can you trust someone with no background checks or references? Full background checks were conducted, Harrison said coolly. Not that it should matter. We judge people on their character and actions, not their job titles. Janet has shown more dedication and care in 2 weeks than many so-called professionals showed in months. What about the allegations that she's taking advantage of your vulnerable state? Another reporter asked. Harrison's expression turned to ice. That question is insulting and baseless. Janet has been nothing but professional and kind. Any suggestion otherwise is slander. But you must admit, a woman in the front pressed, it looks suspicious. A woman with massive debt suddenly living in your penthouse, caring for your daughter. Some might call that convenient. Janet flinched. Harrison saw it and his jaw clenched. What's convenient, he said, his voice hard, is that my daughter is healing. What's convenient is that she's happy for the first time in 8 months. If you want to make that into something ugly, that says more about you than it does about Janet. We're done here. He stepped away from the podium despite the shouted follow-up questions and walked directly to Janet. Let's go home. They rode the elevator in silence, Rebecca tactfully staying behind. When they reached the penthouse, Harrison finally spoke. I'm sorry you had to hear those things. They weren't wrong about everything, Janet said quietly. I do have debt. I'm living in your home. From the outside it does look questionable. From the outside people are idiots, Harrison said bluntly. Janet, look at me. She did and found him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I don't care what they think, he said. I care what's best for Tessa. And what's best for Tessa is you. I'd hire you again in a heartbeat, credentials be damned. Even though it's causing you problems? The only problem is people who judge without understanding. We'll weather this. Together. Together. That word again wrapping around Janet's heart. Tessa burst into the room then, having been with the building's concierge during the conference. Did you tell them, Daddy? Did you tell them how amazing Mama Janet is? I did, Harrison said, hugging his daughter. And if they didn't listen, that's their loss. But the storm didn't end with the press conference. If anything, it intensified. Social media exploded with opinions. Some people defended Janet, sharing their own stories of how love and understanding mattered more than credentials. Others doubled down on the criticism, calling Harrison irresponsible and Janet opportunistic. Janet's old apartment building was photographed. Her former neighbors were interviewed. Someone even tracked down Kimberly's death certificate and posted details about the medical debt, turning Janet's deepest pain into entertainment. She stopped sleeping well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the headlines, heard the judgment. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was in over her head. Maybe Tessa deserved someone better. Harrison noticed, of course. 3 days after the conference, he found Janet sitting in the library at 2 a.m, staring at the city lights. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. Janet shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those articles. Hear those comments. What if they're right, Harrison? What if I'm not enough?" He sat beside her on the couch. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you?" She didn't answer, but he continued anyway. "I see someone who lost everything and kept going. Someone who turns her pain into purpose. Someone who looks at my daughter and sees not a broken child but a whole person who deserves love and patience. I see strength, Janet. Real strength, not the fake kind that comes from money or power. The kind that comes from surviving and choosing kindness anyway." "I'm scared," Janet admitted. "Not of the media but of failing her. Of failing you both." Harrison reached out and took her hand. His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "You couldn't fail us if you tried. You've already succeeded beyond anything I dared hope for." They sat in silence for a while, his hand warm in hers. The city spread below them, millions of lights representing millions of people living their own complicated lives. Janet felt small and overwhelmed, and yet, with Harrison beside her, not quite so alone. "Thank you," she said finally. "For defending me. For believing in me." "Always," Harrison said. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, tender. It made Janet's breath catch. "Harrison," she started, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know," he interrupted gently. "It's complicated. We're both still grieving. The timing is terrible. The media is watching everything. But Janet, I need you to know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude or convenience. It's real. You're real. And that terrifies me as much as it does you." Janet's heart hammered. She'd been feeling it too, this growing attraction that went beyond friendship or professional respect. But acknowledging it made it real, made it dangerous. "I can't lose anyone else," she whispered. "I can't survive another loss." "Neither can I," Harrison said. "So we'll be careful. We'll take it slow. But I won't lie and say I don't feel this, whatever this is. And I don't think you can either." He was right. Janet couldn't deny the pull between them, the way her whole body came alive when he was near, the way his smile made her feel things she thought had died with Kimberly. "We should probably focus on Tessa," she said, though her hand stayed in his. "Absolutely," Harrison agreed. "That's the priority. But eventually, when the time is right, we should also acknowledge that we matter too. That healing can include hope for something new." They sat together until dawn painted the sky pink and gold. When they finally stood to start the day, something had shifted between them. Not a relationship yet, but a possibility. Maybe. A door left cracked open for when they were both ready to walk through it. The media storm continued for another week. But Janet stopped reading the articles, stopped letting strangers' opinions dictate her worth. She focused instead on Tessa, on the memory garden project they were planning, on the small moments of joy they were building together. And sometimes, late at night, she'd remember the feel of Harrison's lips on her hand and let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like to let love in again. The community room on the building's second floor had been empty for months, used only for occasional board meetings. Now it was transforming into something magical. Janet and Tessa worked together, painting one wall a soft sky blue while Harrison and Rebecca moved tables into position. "How many kids do you think will come?" Tessa asked, carefully applying paint in even strokes. "Even if it's just one, that's one person we're helping," Janet said. She'd learned not to set expectations too high. The memory garden project was important, but she knew grief was a private thing. Not everyone would want to share it. What if they think it's dumb? Tessa worried. Then that's okay too. But I don't think they will. Sometimes people just need permission to talk about the hard stuff. This gives them that. Rebecca pinned flyers around the building and posted about it online, carefully avoiding the controversy about Janet. The description was simple: a weekly art space for kids and families who've experienced loss. All supplies provided. All feelings welcome. The first session was scheduled for Saturday morning. Janet barely slept the night before, worried no one would show. But when she and Tessa arrived at 9 a.m. with boxes of art supplies, 3 families were already waiting in the hallway. A mother with 2 boys who'd lost their father to cancer. Twin girls whose grandmother had recently died. A teenage boy whose best friend had been killed in a car accident. They looked nervous but hopeful. Janet's eyes filled with tears. She'd been so focused on helping Tessa, she'd forgotten how many people carried this kind of pain. "Welcome," she said warmly. "Come in. Find a spot wherever you're comfortable." Harrison had spared no expense on supplies. Paints, markers, clay, fabric, beads, glitter, paper in every color. The tables were covered with possibilities. Janet didn't give instructions, just open the space. "This is a place to remember," she explained. "To create things that honor the people we've lost. There's no wrong way to do this. You can paint, draw, sculpt, whatever feels right. And if you want to talk about your person, we're here to listen. If you'd rather work quietly, that's okay too." At first, everyone was hesitant. The children looked to their parents. The parents looked at their hands. Then Tessa picked up a paintbrush. "I'm making a portrait of my mama," she announced. She had the best smile. "I want to remember that." Her simple declaration broke the ice. The others started creating too. The room filled with the quiet sounds of art, of healing. Janet moved between tables, offering encouragement, listening when people needed to talk. The mother with 2 boys started crying halfway through painting a family portrait. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," she said. "He's been gone a year and it still hurts so much." "You're doing it perfectly," Janet assured her. "And it's supposed to hurt. That pain is just love with nowhere to go. Projects like this give it somewhere to land." The woman nodded, wiping her eyes. "My boys don't talk about him much. I think they're trying to protect me." Janet looked at the boys, hunched over their drawings. "Want to know what helped Tessa? When I told her it was okay to be sad. That missing someone means you loved them. Maybe your boys need to hear that too." The woman took a shaky breath and called her boys over. "Come here, you two." Janet watched as the family huddled together, finally talking about their grief instead of hiding it. This was why the project mattered. Not the art itself, but the permission it gave people to feel. Harrison arrived an hour into the session with coffee and pastries from an expensive bakery. He'd stayed away initially, not wanting his presence to intimidate anyone. But Janet had texted him that it was going well, and he came bearing treats. "Mr. Bradford," one of the mothers said, startled. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I wouldn't miss it," Harrison said warmly. "My daughter and Janet came up with this project, but it belongs to all of you now." He sat down at a table and picked up some clay. "My wife died 8 months ago," he said to no one in particular. "I thought I had to be strong, had to keep working, had to pretend I was okay. But Janet and Tessa taught me that pretending doesn't work. You have to feel it even when it hurts." His honesty broke down another barrier. The teenage boy who'd been silent until now spoke up. "People keep telling me to move on. That my friend would want me to be happy. But I don't know how to be happy without him." "You don't have to be happy yet," Harrison said. "You just have to be honest. The happiness comes later, in small moments you don't expect." They worked together for another hour, creating art that ranged from beautiful to abstract to heartbreaking. When the session ended, everyone seemed lighter somehow. Tired but relieved. Like they'd put down heavy burdens at least for a little while. "Can we come back next week?" one of the twin girls asked. "This happens every Saturday," Janet promised. "As long as you need it." After everyone left, Janet, Harrison, and Tessa stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by the artwork. It was taped to walls, spread across tables, a riot of color and memory and love. "We did something good," Tessa said quietly. "We did something great," Harrison corrected. He looked at Janet. "This was your idea. Your heart. Thank you for sharing it." Janet felt her cheeks warm. It was Tessa's idea too. "We're a team." "Yes," Harrison said, his eyes holding hers. "We are." Over the next weeks, the memory garden grew. More families joined. Some came once, some came every week. Janet started recognizing regulars, learning their stories, watching them slowly heal. They expanded beyond just art. One week they brought in a grief counselor to answer questions. Another week they had a music therapist teach them about how songs could hold emotions. Mrs. Patterson from the community garden came to teach the kids about planting seeds, about how growth happened even in darkness. The media coverage shifted too. Reporters who'd been critical started writing positive pieces about the project. Local news came to film a session. A magazine wanted to interview Janet about her approach to helping grieving children. You're becoming famous, Rebecca teased one afternoon as they reviewed interview requests. I don't want to be famous, Janet said. I just want to help. You're doing both, Rebecca said. And it's making a real difference. We've had inquiries from other buildings about starting similar programs. Harrison's considering making this into a non-profit. A non-profit. Janet had never imagined it would grow so large. But if it meant helping more families, she was all for it. Harrison brought it up that evening over dinner. I'd like to establish a foundation, he said. The Catherine Bradford Foundation for Grieving Families. We'd fund memory garden projects across the city, train facilitators, provide supplies. Make sure every family has access to this kind of support. That's beautiful, Janet said. Your wife would love that. I'd want you to run it, Harrison continued. Not as a volunteer but as the executive director. Full salary, benefits, the works. This is your vision, Janet. You should see it through. Janet's hands trembled. I don't have the experience to run a nonprofit. You have something better. Passion, compassion, and first-hand understanding. The practical stuff we can teach you. But what you bring, that natural gift for helping people feel seen, that can't be taught. Tessa bounced in her seat. Say yes, Mama Janet. Please. Janet looked at their hopeful faces, at the family they'd become. Executive director of a foundation. It was more than she'd ever dreamed possible back when she was scrubbing toilets and counting down the minutes until her shift ended. Okay, she said. Yes, I'll do it. Harrison's smile lit up his whole face. We'll start the paperwork tomorrow. That night, after Tessa went to bed, Janet and Harrison sat in the library going over plans for the foundation. They were close together on the couch, papers spread between them, but Janet was intensely aware of every place their bodies almost touched. I keep having to remind myself this is real, she admitted. 6 weeks ago I was cleaning these floors. Now I'm starting a nonprofit with a billionaire. 6 weeks ago I was lost, Harrison countered. My daughter wasn't speaking, I was barely functioning, and I saw no way forward. You changed everything. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the same gesture from weeks ago. But this time he didn't pull away. His hand lingered on her cheek. Janet, he said softly. I know we said we'd focus on Tessa, that we'd take things slow. But I need you to know that I think about you constantly. About how you laugh, how you see beauty in broken things, how you make everything better just by existing. Janet's heart raced. Harrison, I feel it too. But I'm scared. So am I, he admitted. Terrified. But I'm more scared of letting fear stop me from living. He leaned closer. Janet's breath caught. She could feel the warmth of him, smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Can I kiss you? He asked. She nodded, and his lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle, questioning, full of promise. Janet melted into it, into him, letting herself feel something other than grief for the first time in years. The kiss was sweet and careful, both of them aware of how fragile this thing between them was. When they pulled apart, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. Worth the wait, he murmured. Janet laughed, a real laugh that came from deep in her chest. We're really doing this? If you want to. No pressure. We can still take it slow, figure things out as we go. I want to, Janet said. I'm scared, but I want to. They kissed again, longer this time, deeper. When they finally said goodnight, Janet floated to her room, feeling lighter than she had in years. She looked at Kimberly's photo on her dresser. I think I'm falling in love, she told her daughter's smiling face. And I think you'd like him. Both of them. The city lights sparkled below. A new foundation being born. A new family being built. A new love growing in the spaces grief had carved out. Janet had thought her story ended when Kimberly died. But maybe it was just beginning. The charity gala was held in the building's ballroom, 71st floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the glittering city. Janet had never been to anything like it. Women in designer gowns, men in tuxedos, champagne flowing like water, all gathered to raise money for children's hospitals. Rebecca had taken Janet shopping, insisting that Harrison's guest needed to look the part. Janet had resisted at first, uncomfortable with spending so much money on a dress she'd wear once. But when she tried on the royal blue gown, even she had to admit it was stunning. The fabric flowed like water, the color made her dark skin glow, and the cut was elegant without being revealing. Now, standing in front of her mirror, Janet barely recognized herself. Rebecca had helped with her hair and makeup. Small diamond earrings, borrowed from Rebecca's collection, sparkled at her ears. She looked like she belonged in this world even though she felt like an imposter. A knock on her door. "Come in," she called. Harrison entered and stopped dead, his eyes widening. "Janet. You look, wow." She felt her cheeks warm. "Is it too much?" "It's perfect. You're perfect." He was in a sharp black tuxedo that fit him perfectly, making him look even more handsome than usual. "I have something for you." He held out a velvet box. Inside was a delicate necklace, sapphires and diamonds arranged in a pattern that looked almost like butterfly wings. "Harrison, I can't accept this," Janet protested. "Please," he said. "I had it made for you. The butterflies are for Kimberly. The design is from one of Tessa's drawings. It represents what you've built here, how you've turned grief into beauty." Janet's eyes filled with tears. He'd thought about this, made it personal, tied it to everything that mattered. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "May I?" Harrison asked, gesturing to the necklace. Janet nodded and turned around, lifting her hair. His fingers were gentle as he fastened the clasp. His breath was warm on her neck, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then he pressed a soft kiss to her bare shoulder, and Janet's whole body came alive. "Ready?" he asked, his voice rough. "As I'll ever be," she said. Tessa was staying with Rebecca's family for the evening, excited to have a sleepover with Rebecca's niece. Before they left, Tessa had made Janet promise to tell her every detail, especially about dancing. The ballroom was even more impressive than Janet expected. Crystal chandeliers, white-clothed tables with elaborate centerpieces, a string quartet playing classical music. Janet recognized some faces from the news, actors and politicians and business moguls. She felt completely out of her depth. Harrison seemed to sense her nervousness. He kept his hand at the small of her back, a steady presence. "You belong here," he whispered. "More than half these people." They mingled, Harrison introducing Janet as the director of the Catherine Bradford Foundation. Some people were warm, genuinely interested in the work they were doing. Others looked at her with barely concealed judgment, clearly recognizing her from the media storm. One woman in a shimmering gold dress looked Janet up and down. "How fascinating," she said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "From janitor to foundation director. Quite the fairy tale." "Actually," Harrison said coolly, "Janet earned her position through dedication, compassion and hard work. The same qualities most people here pretend to value." The woman had the grace to look embarrassed and moved away. Janet squeezed Harrison's hand gratefully. Dinner was a 7-course affair that Janet barely tasted, too nervous to eat. Harrison kept her laughing with whispered comments about the other guests, pointing out who'd had too much plastic surgery or whose dating scandals were currently trending. "You're terrible," Janet whispered, trying not to laugh during a particularly boring speech. "I'm honest," Harrison corrected. "There's a difference." After dinner, the music shifted to something more modern. Couples moved to the dance floor, swaying together under the soft lights. Harrison stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me?" Janet's heart jumped. "I don't really know how to dance like this. The fancy kind, I mean." "Just follow my lead," Harrison said. "I've got you." He did have her. His hand was firm on her back, guiding her through the steps. Janet focused on not tripping over her dress, but gradually she relaxed into the rhythm, into him. They moved together naturally, like they'd been doing this for years instead of minutes. "See," Harrison said. "You're perfect at everything." "Hardly," Janet laughed. He spun her out and back, pulling her closer than before. "Janet, there's something I need to tell you." His tone made her nervous. "What is it?" "I haven't felt alive since Catherine died," he said quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "These past 8 months I've been going through the motions. Getting up, going to work, taking care of Tessa, but not really living. Just existing." Janet's throat tightened. She understood that feeling too well. "Then you showed up," Harrison continued. "And everything changed. Tessa started healing." The apartment filled with laughter again. "But it's not just about Tessa. Janet, you make me want to live again. You make me feel things I thought died with Catherine. And that terrifies me and excites me, and I can't keep pretending it's not happening." They'd stopped dancing, standing still while other couples moved around them. Janet's heart hammered so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "I didn't think I'd ever want to open my heart again. The idea of loving someone and potentially losing them, I couldn't survive it a second time. But Harrison, I'm falling for you. Maybe I've been falling since that first day. And it scares me more than anything." "We're both terrified," Harrison said, a smile playing at his lips. "Maybe that's how we know it's real." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs gentle on her cheeks. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I just need you to know how I feel. That this is real for me. You're not just Tessa's nanny or the foundation director or any other role. You're the woman I think about when I wake up, the person I want to tell about my day, the one who makes everything better. Janet felt tears spill over. Happy tears, scared tears, overwhelmed tears all mixed together. I love you, she whispered. I didn't mean to, I tried not to, but I do. Harrison's smile was brilliant. I love you too. So much it hurts. He kissed her there on the dance floor, surrounded by Manhattan's elite, and Janet didn't care who was watching or what they thought. For the first time since Kimberly died, she felt fully present in her own life. Not just surviving but living. When they pulled apart, she saw Tessa standing at the edge of the dance floor with Rebecca. Wait, she was supposed to be at a sleepover. But Tessa was grinning, bouncing on her toes with excitement. I couldn't miss this, Tessa called out. Rebecca said you two were finally figuring it out. Janet laughed through her tears. Harrison beckoned his daughter over, and Tessa ran to them, wrapping her arms around both their waists. Does this mean Mama Janet is really staying forever? Tessa asked. If she'll have us, Harrison said, looking at Janet. Forever sounds good, Janet said. They stood together in the middle of the ballroom, the three of them wrapped in an embrace that felt like coming home. Around them the gala continued. Music played, people danced, money got raised for good causes. But for Janet, Harrison, and Tessa, the world had narrowed to just this moment. This feeling. This new family they were building from the broken pieces of their old lives. Rebecca wiped her eyes from where she stood at the edge of the room. The quartet shifted to a new song, something slow and romantic. Harrison took Janet's hand again, and Tessa stayed between them as they swayed together, all three of them dancing, all three of them healing, all three of them learning that love didn't replace what was lost but grew alongside the memories, making room for both grief and joy. Later that night, back at the penthouse, they tucked Tessa into bed together. She insisted on holding both their hands. I'm happy, she said sleepily. Really happy. I think Mama Catherine would be happy too. And Kimberly. I know they would be, Janet said, kissing Tessa's forehead. When the little girl was asleep, Janet and Harrison stood in the hallway, still hand in hand. So we're really doing this, Janet said. Together. Together, Harrison confirmed. I'm not saying it will be easy. We both carry a lot of pain. But we'll figure it out. One day at a time, Janet agreed. He kissed her goodnight at her door, a sweet lingering kiss that promised more but respected the need to take things slow. When Janet went to bed, she felt like she was floating. The butterfly necklace lay on her dresser, catching the city lights. She picked up Kimberly's photo. I found love again, baby girl. And I'm going to let myself have it. Because you taught me that life is precious, that joy matters, that we have to hold on to the beautiful moments when they come. Thank you for being my daughter. Thank you for teaching me how to love so big it survives even death. Outside, the city sparkled under a clear sky. Three hearts beating in sync, building something new from something broken, proving that endings could also be beginnings, and that love was always worth the risk. 3 months passed in a blur of happiness. The foundation was thriving, with memory garden projects launching in 6 different neighborhoods. Janet's days filled with purpose, split between helping families and spending time with Tessa. And Harrison, always Harrison, making her laugh, making her feel seen, making her believe in second chances. They hadn't made any official announcements about their relationship. It felt private, precious, something to protect. But everyone who mattered knew. Rebecca teased them mercilessly. Mrs. Patterson from the community garden gave her blessing with a knowing smile. And Tessa treated it as the most natural thing in the world, often holding both their hands as they walked through the city. Janet had moved into a larger suite, one that connected to Harrison's through a shared sitting room. Most nights they fell asleep on the couch together, talking until late, learning everything about each other. Harrison told her about Catherine, about their life together, about the guilt he sometimes felt for moving on. Janet shared more about Kimberly, about the medical bills that still stung, about her fears that happiness wouldn't last. We deserve this, Harrison would say whenever Janet's doubts crept in. We've both survived so much. We're allowed to be happy. And she was happy. Deliriously, terrifyingly happy. Which is why the phone call that came on a Tuesday afternoon felt like ice water in her veins. Ms. Washington? The school administrator's voice was tight with stress. This is Principal Morrison from Tessa's academy. I'm calling because, well, Tessa didn't return from lunch recess. We've searched the grounds, but she's gone. Janet's hand went numb, the phone nearly slipping from her grasp. What do you mean gone? We think she may have left campus. The gate was open for a delivery. We've already called the police and Mr. Bradford. We're hoping she'll turn up quickly, but I wanted to let you know." The call ended and Janet stood frozen in the foundation office. Gone. Tessa was gone. All the old trauma came flooding back, the helplessness, the terror, the knowledge that bad things happened and you couldn't always stop them. Her phone rang again. "Harrison. I'm on my way to pick you up," he said, his voice controlled, but Janet could hear the panic underneath. "The police are looking. She can't have gotten far." "Where would she go?" Janet asked, grabbing her coat. "Did something happen at school? Was she upset?" "They said she seemed fine all morning. Just disappeared during recess." Rebecca drove them to the school, weaving through traffic with practiced efficiency. Police cars crowded the front entrance. Officers questioned staff and students. Everyone looked worried, guilty, scared. Harrison grabbed Janet's hand as they hurried inside. Principal Morrison met them, a tall woman with gray hair and eyes red from crying. "We're so sorry," she said. "We're reviewing security footage now. The gate was only open for 5 minutes during the delivery." 5 minutes? That's all it took for a child to vanish. They watched the footage together, Janet's heart in her throat. There was Tessa at recess playing hopscotch with friends. Then she stopped, looked at something off camera and walked calmly toward the gate. Not running, not scared, just walking like she knew exactly where she was going. "What did she see?" Janet asked. "What made her leave?" The police detective, a kind-faced woman named Sarah Kim, pointed to the screen. "There's a bird there, see? Flying toward the trees. She seems to be following it." A bird. Tessa had followed a bird out of the school. Janet's mind raced. Why would she do that? "The community garden," Janet said suddenly. "Harrison, the community garden where Catherine volunteered. Tessa mentioned it last week, said she wanted to go back but was afraid to ask. What if she went there?" Hope flared in Harrison's eyes. "It's 3 miles from here. Could she walk that far?" "She's determined enough," Janet said. "And it's where she feels close to her mother." Detective Kim immediately dispatched officers to the garden. Harrison, Janet, and several police cars raced through the city. Janet prayed silently, pleading with whoever was listening to keep Tessa safe. The garden looked different in the afternoon sun, the plants heavy with late summer vegetables. Mrs. Patterson stood at the gate looking worried. "She's here," the older woman said as soon as they arrived. "Been here about an hour. I didn't know she wasn't supposed to be. I called you as soon as the police contacted me." Relief made Janet's knees weak. Harrison ran past them into the garden. Janet followed, her heart pounding. They found Tessa in the tomato patch, the same one she'd planted with Catherine. She sat cross-legged on the ground, dirt on her school uniform, tears streaming down her face. She looked up when they approached, her expression a mix of defiance and fear. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just needed to see it." Harrison dropped to his knees and pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her so tight it must have hurt. Janet knelt beside them, her own tears falling. "Why did you leave school?" Harrison asked, his voice rough. "You scared us so badly." Tessa sobbed against his shoulder. "I heard some kids talking. They said that when people die you forget them. That memories fade and eventually it's like they were never real. I got so scared, Daddy. I don't want to forget Mama." Janet's heart broke. "Oh, sweetheart, that's not true. Memories don't fade if you keep them alive." "But I couldn't remember what her voice sounded like this morning," Tessa said. "I tried and tried but I couldn't hear it. What if I forget everything about her?" Harrison cupped his daughter's face. "You won't forget. We won't let you. That's why we have the Memory Garden Project, the photos, the stories. Your mama lives in all of that." "I came here because this is where she was happiest," Tessa said. "I thought maybe I could hear her voice in the plants she grew." "Did you?" Janet asked gently. Tessa nodded. "Kind of. I remembered her laugh when a tomato fell on my head. Remembered how she'd sing while we worked. It came back when I was here." Detective Kim approached carefully. "Tessa, what you did was very dangerous. You could have gotten lost or hurt. Your parents were terrified." "I know," Tessa said miserably. "I wasn't thinking about that. I just needed to remember." "Next time you feel that way," Janet said, "come to us. We'll bring you here together, safely. You never have to run away to remember your mama. We'll help you keep her alive in your heart." Tessa looked between Janet and Harrison. "Promise? Promise you won't get mad if I get sad about her?" "We promise," Harrison said firmly. "Tessa, loving your mother isn't something you need to hide or feel guilty about. She was special. She'll always be part of our family, even though she's not physically here. And Mama Janet doesn't replace her, Tessa said like she'd been worrying about this. She's different. I love you both. You can love us both, Janet assured her. Hearts are big enough for all kinds of love. Your mother would want you to be happy, to let people care for you. I promise you she's proud of how brave you've been. They sat together in the dirt among the tomato plants while Mrs. Patterson brought them water and the police cleared out. Detective Kim took a statement but was gentle about it, recognizing that Tessa wasn't a runaway but a grieving child who'd made a mistake. We're going to work on a safety plan, Harrison said as they finally stood to leave. You'll have my location app on your phone and Mrs. Patterson's number. If you ever feel like you need to come here, you tell us and we'll bring you. Deal? Deal, Tessa agreed. At home that evening they ordered pizza and ate on the living room floor, all three of them exhausted. Tessa fell asleep between them, and neither Janet nor Harrison had the heart to move her. I thought we'd lost her, Harrison said quietly. For those few hours I thought the worst had happened. But it didn't, Janet said. She's safe. She's here. Because you knew where to look. Because you understood what she needed. Harrison reached across their sleeping daughter to take Janet's hand. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're not going to have to find out, Janet promised. They carried Tessa to bed together, tucking her in with extra care. Janet stayed with her while Harrison showered, and Tessa's eyes fluttered open. Mama Janet, she murmured. Are you mad at me? No, baby. I'm not mad. Just grateful you're safe. I love you, Tessa said. You and Daddy and Mama Catherine. I love all of you. We all love you too, Janet said. Now sleep. Tomorrow's a new day. Later, in Harrison's arms on the couch, Janet finally let herself fall apart. The fear, the adrenaline, the relief all came crashing down. Harrison held her while she cried, his own tears falling into her hair. She's okay, he kept saying. She's okay, we're all okay. And they were. Shaken but whole. Scared but safe. Three people bound together by loss and love, learning that family wasn't about perfection but about showing up, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The city lights twinkled peacefully below. In her bed, Tessa slept with the music box beside her, its familiar melody playing softly. In the living room, Janet and Harrison held each other, grateful for second chances and the courage to take them. 6 months later, winter had transformed the city into a wonderland of snow and twinkling lights. The Memory Garden project had expanded to 12 locations across the city, helping hundreds of families process their grief. Janet had settled into her role as executive director, splitting her time between the foundation office and the penthouse that had become home. Home. The word still felt surreal sometimes. Janet would wake up in her beautiful suite, see Tessa's drawings on the walls and Harrison's sweatshirt draped over her chair, and have to remind herself this wasn't a dream. This was her life now. This was real. She and Harrison had grown closer in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. They were careful around Tessa, keeping physical affection appropriate, but the little girl wasn't fooled. She'd started calling them my parents, plural, and neither Janet nor Harrison had the heart to correct her. Tonight was the Foundation's winter gala, celebrating their first full year of operation. Unlike the stuffy event 6 months ago, this one was held in a community center in Brooklyn, filled with families who'd participated in the memory gardens. The dress code was casual. The food was potluck. The entertainment was kids reading poems they'd written about their lost loved ones. Janet wore a simple green dress that Tessa had helped pick out. No diamonds tonight, just the butterfly necklace Harrison had given her, which she wore every day now. Tessa wore a bright red dress with a tulle skirt, looking happy and healthy and whole. You ready for this? Harrison asked, adjusting his navy sweater. He'd traded his usual suit for casual clothes, looking more relaxed than Janet had ever seen him. Ready? Janet said. She took his hand, then Tessa's, and they walked into the community center together. The room was packed. Janet recognized so many faces, families they'd helped, kids whose artwork covered the walls of the various memory gardens. Mrs. Patterson was there with her church group. Rebecca had brought her whole family. Even Detective Kim had showed up, off-duty but supportive. The evening was beautiful. Children performed songs and poems. Families shared stories of healing. Janet and Harrison gave a short speech about the Foundation's growth and goals for the coming year. But the highlight came when Tessa took the microphone. Hi, she said, her voice small but clear. I'm Tessa Bradford. A year ago I couldn't talk. Couldn't smile. Couldn't imagine being happy ever again. My mama died and I thought I died too. Janet's throat tightened. They practiced this speech, but hearing Tessa say it out loud was still powerful. Then I met Janet, Tessa continued. She wasn't a therapist or a nanny or anything fancy. She was just a person who understood being sad. And she showed me that you can miss someone and still have good days. You can love someone who's gone and still love the people who are here. She looked directly at Janet and Harrison. My mama Catherine will always be my mama. But now I have Mama Janet too. And my dad has someone who makes him smile again. We're not the same family we were before, but we're still a family. And that's okay. The room erupted in applause. Janet wiped her eyes and Harrison squeezed her hand so tight it almost hurt. After the event, as they helped clean up, Mrs. Patterson pulled Janet aside. That man's going to propose soon, she said with a knowing smile. I've seen that look before. Janet's heart skipped. What look? The one that says he can't imagine life without you. Mark my words, child. That proposal's coming. Janet tried to dismiss it, but the thought planted itself in her mind. She and Harrison hadn't discussed marriage. They'd been so focused on healing, on building the foundation, on making sure Tessa was stable. But lately there'd been moments. Comments about someday, and when we're old, and other future phrases that suggested permanence. The proposal came 2 weeks later, but not in the way Janet expected. They were at the original community garden on a sunny Saturday morning. The winter vegetables were dormant, but they were planning spring plantings. Tessa ran ahead, examining the raised beds with Mrs. Patterson. This place means a lot to all of us, Harrison said, standing with Janet by the tomato patch where they'd found Tessa that scary afternoon. It's special, Janet agreed. Catherine proposed to me here, Harrison said. We've been dating for 3 years. She brought me to help with the garden one day, and while we were planting cucumbers, she asked if I'd marry her. No ring, no fancy setup, just 2 people in the dirt making a promise. Janet's breath caught. That's beautiful. She believed in building things, Harrison continued. In taking broken spaces and making them grow. In bringing people together around common purpose. He turned to face Janet fully. She'd love what you've done with the foundation. What we've done with it together. I like to think so, Janet said. Harrison took her hands. Janet Washington, you came into my life when I'd given up hope. You healed my daughter. You reminded me that living matters, that love doesn't run out, that broken hearts can mend. You've become my partner, my best friend, my home. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Janet's hand started shaking. I'm not asking you to replace Catherine or forget Kimberly, Harrison said. I'm asking you to build something new with me. To be my wife, Tessa's mother, the foundation of this family we're creating. Will you marry me? The ring was beautiful, simple. A sapphire flanked by small diamonds, the same blue as her gala dress, the same blue as butterfly wings. Yes, Janet said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely yes. Harrison slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, deep and long and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Tessa and Mrs. Patterson were cheering, having obviously been in on the plan. You knew? Janet asked Tessa. Daddy let me help pick the ring, Tessa said proudly. Do you like it? I love it, Janet said, pulling the little girl into a hug. I love both of you so much. So we're getting married? Tessa asked. Like a real family? We're already a real family, Harrison said. The wedding just makes it official. They spent the rest of the day in the garden, planning and dreaming and laughing. Mrs. Patterson insisted on cooking them dinner. Other gardeners stopped by to congratulate them. By the time they headed home, it was dark and Janet's face hurt from smiling. In the car, Tessa fell asleep in the back seat. Harrison drove with one hand, the other holding Janet's, his thumb rubbing over her new ring. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For saying yes. For choosing us. For being brave enough to love again. Thank you for asking, Janet said. For seeing me, really seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. They drove through the city, past the places that had marked their journey. The Sterling Heights Tower where Janet had once scrubbed floors. The park where they'd fed ducks. The community center where the foundation held its programs. All of it connected, all of it leading to this moment. At home, they tucked Tessa into bed and she insisted on knowing all the wedding details immediately. Can I be the flower girl? She asked. You'll be the maid of honor, Janet said. If you want. You're the reason we found each other. I want to wear a purple dress, Tessa declared. Like the butterfly. Purple it is, Harrison agreed. After Tessa finally fell asleep, Janet and Harrison sat in their usual spot in the library, planning and dreaming about the future. The wedding would be small, intimate, just the people who mattered. held in the community garden where both of them had been proposed to, where love had literally grown from the ground up. "I want to adopt you officially," Janet told Tessa the next morning over breakfast. "If that's okay with you. I know I can't replace your mother, but I'd like to be your legal parent. Your forever parent." Tessa's eyes went wide. "Really? You want to adopt me?" "More than anything," Janet said. "If you're comfortable with it." Tessa launched herself at Janet, wrapping her arms around her neck. "Yes, yes, yes. 1,000 times yes." The paperwork started immediately. The adoption would be finalized before the wedding, making their family official in every way. Janet's sister Imani came from Chicago with her son Tyrone to celebrate, bringing the family circle wider. "Look at you," Imani said, hugging Janet tight. "From janitor to executive director to billionaire's fiancé. Only you could do that." "It's not about the money," Janet protested. "I know," Imani said seriously. "It's about healing. About finding love again. About building something beautiful from something broken. Kimberly would be so proud, Janet. So proud of who you've become." The weeks flew by in a blur of planning and paperwork and joy. The adoption was approved in record time, Harrison's lawyers making sure everything was handled perfectly. The day Janet signed the papers making her legally Tessa's mother, all three of them cried. "You're really mine now," Tessa said. "Forever mine." "Forever and ever," Janet promised. The wedding planning was simple because they didn't want elaborate. Just family and friends in the garden, a simple ceremony, food from local restaurants, music from the community center's youth orchestra. Mrs. Patterson would officiate, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. "This is how Catherine would have done it," Harrison said. "Simple, meaningful, focused on what matters." "She had good taste," Janet said. The night before the wedding, Janet had trouble sleeping. She stood at her window watching the city lights, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From scrubbing toilets to running a foundation. From drowning in grief to swimming in love. From being invisible to being seen, truly seen by people who mattered. A soft knock on her door. Tessa in her pajamas. "Can't sleep either?" Janet asked. Tessa shook her head and climbed into bed with Janet. They lay together in the dark, looking at the city. "Tomorrow you'll really be my mama," Tessa said. "On paper and everything." "I'm already your mama," Janet said. "The paper just makes it official." "Are you nervous?" "A little," Janet admitted. "Excited nervous. Happy nervous." "Me too," Tessa said. "I'm happy you're marrying Daddy. I'm happy we're a family. But I'm also a little sad." "About your mother?" Janet guessed. "Yeah. I wish she could be here. Wish she could meet you, see how happy Daddy is, know I'm okay." Janet pulled Tessa closer. "I think she does know. I think she's watching from wherever she is, proud of you, grateful that your dad found love again. Love doesn't end, sweetheart. It transforms, but it never really stops. Like how I still love Mama Catherine and also love you? Exactly like that." They fell asleep together, the city lights twinkling like stars. Tomorrow would bring a wedding, but tonight was perfect just as it was. A mother and daughter, chosen family, bound by more than biology. Bound by love. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Janet woke with Tessa still curled against her side, both of them having slept soundly through the night. She took a moment to simply breathe, to let the reality sink in. Today she was marrying Harrison Bradford. Today their family became official in every way that mattered. Rebecca arrived early with a team of people to help them get ready. Janet's suite transformed into a preparation space, filled with laughter and excitement. Imani did Janet's hair, weaving small white flowers into her natural curls. The emerald green dress Janet had chosen was simple but elegant, flowing and comfortable. She looked like herself, just a more polished version. Tessa wore her purple dress with pride, twirling to make the skirt spin. "I look like a butterfly," she declared. "You absolutely do," Janet agreed. The ceremony was at 2 p.m. They arrived at the community garden to find it transformed. White chairs arranged in rows, flowers everywhere, strings of lights ready for the evening reception. The tomato patch where Harrison had proposed had been cleared and decorated with an arch made of vines and blooms. Mrs. Patterson wore a bright yellow dress and held a worn Bible. "Ready to make this official?" she asked with a warm smile. The guests began arriving. Staff from the foundation. Families from the memory gardens. Rebecca and her family. Detective Kim. Even some of Harrison's business associates who'd become genuine friends. It was small but perfect, filled with people who'd been part of their journey. Janet waited in Mrs. Patterson's small office, her heart racing. Imani and Tessa stood with her, both fighting tears. "You look beautiful," Imani said. "Absolutely beautiful." "Mama Catherine would think so too," Tessa added. "I told her about today. In my prayers. I think she's happy." "I think so too," Janet said, her own eyes wet. The music started, a simple guitar playing a melody that made Janet's breath catch. It was Brahms' Lullaby, the song from the music box, rearranged for guitar. Harrison had planned this, she knew. Her heart swelled with love for him. Tessa walked down the aisle first, scattering purple and white flower petals. Then it was Janet's turn. Imani squeezed her hand once, and Janet walked alone, head high, toward the man waiting under the arch. Harrison looked breathtaking in a deep maroon suit. His eyes were wet as he watched her approach, and Janet felt every wall she'd ever built crumble away. This was it. This was her new life, her new family, her new beginning. Mrs. Patterson smiled at them both as Janet took her place beside Harrison. "Dearly beloved," she began, her voice carrying across the garden. "We gather here today not to witness the joining of two people, but the celebration of a family already formed through love, loss, and healing." The ceremony was short and sweet. Harrison and Janet had written their own vows. Harrison went first. "Janet, you came into my life like light breaking through darkness. You healed my daughter when I didn't know how. You reminded me that living was possible, that love could grow again. You saw past my money and status to the broken man underneath, and you helped me become whole. I promise to honor your past while building our future. I promise to be a partner in every sense. I promise to love you, cherish you, and choose you every single day for the rest of my life." Janet was crying before he finished. She took a shaky breath and began her own vows. "Harrison, a year ago I was invisible. Scrubbing floors, drowning in grief, certain my story had ended. Then you saw me. Really saw me. You trusted me with your daughter's heart and your own. You gave me purpose, family, and a love I never thought I'd find again. I promise to honor Catherine's memory and the love you shared. I promise to be the mother Tessa needs and the partner you deserve. I promise to build this life with you, day by day, moment by moment, for as long as we both shall live." Mrs. Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, and Harrison kissed Janet like they were the only two people in the world. The small crowd erupted in cheers. Tessa ran up and wrapped her arms around both their legs, and they lifted her between them, all three of them laughing and crying and whole. The reception was exactly what they'd wanted. Casual, warm, filled with love. They ate from food trucks parked along the street. The youth orchestra played. Children ran through the garden while adults sat on blankets talking and laughing. It felt like a neighborhood celebration, which it was. This community had become their family. As the sun set, the string lights came on, transforming the garden into something magical. Harrison and Janet had their first dance in the same tomato patch where everything had started. The song was, of course, the lullaby that had brought them together. "I love you," Harrison murmured as they swayed together. "I love you too," Janet said. "Thank you for seeing me. For choosing me. Always," he promised. Tessa danced with them, making it a family dance. Then other guests joined in, until the whole garden was filled with movement and music and joy. As the night deepened, Janet stood at the edge of the garden with a cup of coffee, watching everyone she loved celebrate. Imani came to stand beside her. "How are you feeling?" her sister asked. "Like I might wake up and find this was all a dream," Janet admitted. "It's real," Imani assured her. "You deserve this, Janet. After everything you've been through, you deserve every bit of this happiness." Janet nodded, her throat tight. She looked at the sky, at the stars just beginning to appear. "Kimberly," she whispered. "I hope you're watching. I hope you're proud." She felt a gentle breeze, warm despite the winter chill, and took it as her daughter's answer. The evening wound down around 10. Guests started leaving, all of them hugging Janet and Harrison, thanking them for sharing this day. Mrs. Patterson stayed to help clean up, refusing all offers to just let the cleanup crew handle it. "This garden is special," she said. "Catherine built it with love. You two got married here with love. We take care of it with love too." They were loading the last of the decorations into a van when a woman approached hesitantly. She was young, early 30s, with a small girl of about 5 holding her hand. The child had big brown eyes and hair in 2 puffs. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the woman said nervously. "My name is Lauren Mitchell. This is my daughter Grace." Something about the woman's expression made Janet's stomach tighten. "It's fine. How can we help you?" Lauren glanced at the little girl, then back at Janet. "This is going to sound strange, but I've been trying to reach you for months. I finally tracked you down through the foundation. I work with the bone marrow registry. Janet's heart stopped. Bone marrow. Kimberly had been on the registry, had donated before she died. They'd told Janet her daughter's marrow had been used, that it might save someone's life. Grace received your daughter's bone marrow donation 3 years ago, Lauren said, her eyes filling with tears. She had leukemia. The same kind Kimberly had. Your daughter saved my baby's life. Janet couldn't breathe. Harrison's arm came around her waist, holding her up. I wanted to find you to thank you, but there are privacy laws, Lauren continued. But then I saw the articles about the foundation, about your story. I knew it was you. I knew Grace's donor had been named Kimberly. The little girl, Grace, stepped forward shyly. Are you Kimberly's mama? Janet dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Yes, sweetie. I am. She saved me, Grace said simply. The doctor said so. They said a little girl's bone marrow made me better. I wanted to meet her family. Janet pulled Grace into a hug, this living, breathing proof that Kimberly's short life had meaning beyond measure. The little girl hugged back, her small arms tight around Janet's neck. Thank you, Lauren said, her voice breaking. Thank you for registering her. Thank you for giving other families a chance when your own daughter was dying. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. Kimberly wanted to help people, Janet managed to say. Even at 7, she understood that her life could save someone else's. She was so brave. Harrison knelt beside them, Tessa joining them too. Grace looked at all of them curiously. Are you a family? She asked. We are, Harrison said. A family built from love and loss and second chances. We'd like to stay in touch, Lauren said. If that's okay with you. Grace asks about her donor sometimes. Wants to know about the girl who saved her life. I'd love that, Janet said. She stood, still holding Grace's hand. I'd love to tell you about Kimberly, about how special she was. And I'd love to know Grace, to see the life my daughter made possible. Actually, Lauren said hesitantly, I was wondering if you'd consider being Grace's godparents. I'm a single mother and I don't have much family. But Grace has life because of Kimberly. It feels right that you'd be part of her story going forward. Janet looked at Harrison, who nodded immediately. She looked at Tessa, who was smiling at Grace with open curiosity. We'd be honored, Janet said. Absolutely honored. Lauren pulled out her phone. I have pictures. Of Grace's treatment, her recovery, everything. I've been documenting it all so she'd know her story when she got older. They sat on a bench together, Grace between Janet and Tessa, looking at photos that showed a sick little girl transformed into a healthy, vibrant child. With every image, Janet felt Kimberly's presence stronger. Her daughter's legacy, living and breathing and beautiful. This is the best wedding present I could have imagined, Janet said. Knowing that Kimberly's life continues through Grace. That her love and bravery made this possible. We'll be in her life, Harrison promised Lauren. Grace will know she's part of our family. That she's connected to us through the bravest little girl who ever lived. Tessa, who'd been quiet, finally spoke. So Grace is like my sister? Kind of. Kind of, Janet agreed. Through Kimberly's gift. The two girls looked at each other and Grace smiled shyly. Want to see the garden? Tessa asked. It's really pretty with all the lights. They ran off together and Janet watched them go with a full heart. Two girls, both alive because of the complicated, beautiful ways love persisted. Tessa healed through Janet's care. Grace saved through Kimberly's donation. Life is strange, Janet said, leaning against Harrison. A year ago I was scrubbing toilets and planning to die with my grief. Tonight I'm married, I have a daughter, and I just met the child my daughter saved. It's too much. Too beautiful. It's exactly what you deserve, Harrison said. Every bit of happiness, every moment of joy. You've earned this, Janet. They exchanged contact information with Lauren, making plans to have Grace over soon. The little girl and Tessa were already inseparable, running through the garden like they'd known each other forever. Mrs. Patterson had watched the whole thing with knowing eyes. Miracles, she said simply. That's what this garden grows. Not just vegetables but miracles. The stars were bright overhead by the time they finally left. They drove home, Tessa asleep in the back seat, the city lights welcoming them. At the penthouse they carried their daughter inside and tucked her into bed. Today was perfect, Tessa murmured sleepily. And now I have a sort of sister. Kimberly gave me that. She did, Janet agreed, kissing her forehead. She's still giving us gifts. In their shared suite, Janet and Harrison finally had a moment alone. Janet placed her wedding bouquet next to Kimberly's photo on the dresser. Thank you, she whispered to her daughter's smiling face. Thank you for saving Grace. Thank you for leading me here. Thank you for teaching me that love never really ends, it just transforms. Harrison wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together looking at the photo. She'd be proud of you, he said. Of the life you've built, the people you've helped, the love you've shared. I think she is, Janet said. She turned in his arms, looking up at her husband. Her husband. The word still felt surreal. I never thought I'd be here. Never thought I'd feel whole again. But you and Tessa, you've healed me. We've healed each other, Harrison corrected. He kissed her softly. That's what family does. We put each other back together, piece by piece. They stood at the window watching the city sleep. Their daughter safe in her bed. A new goddaughter out there, alive because of Kimberly's final gift. A foundation helping hundreds of families. A community built on love and loss and the stubborn belief that healing was possible. Janet thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Invisible, broken, certain her story had ended. She thought about the music box that had started everything, the simple act of kindness that had cascaded into this new life. She thought about Catherine, who she'd never met but who she honored every day by loving her family well. Do you believe in fate? She asked Harrison. I believe in love, he said. I believe in showing up. I believe in choosing hope even when it's hard. If that's fate, then yes. Janet smiled, her heart full to bursting. Below them, the city sparkled like a promise. Behind them, their daughter slept peacefully, dreams filled with butterflies and gardens and all the love that surrounded her. Ahead of them, a future bright with possibility. This was her life now. Not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd expected, but the one she'd fought for, cried for, healed into existence. A life built from broken pieces, transformed into something more beautiful than she'd ever imagined possible. Love hadn't replaced what was lost. It had grown alongside the grief, making room for both sorrow and joy, both memory and hope. Kimberly would always be her first daughter, her heart, her reason for learning how to be strong. And now Tessa was her second chance, her proof that broken people could build beautiful things. Grace, out there somewhere in the city, was her daughter's living legacy. The ultimate gift, the final act of love from a 7-year-old girl who'd understood, even in her last days, that life was precious and worth saving. Janet closed her eyes and felt it all wash over her. The grief that would never fully leave. The love that kept growing. The family that had found her when she was invisible and made her seen. The second chance she'd never thought possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The foundation would keep growing. Tessa would need continued support. Grace would become part of their extended family. Life would continue with all its complexity and pain and unexpected beauty. But tonight, on her wedding night, Janet simply stood in her husband's arms and felt grateful. For surviving. For healing. For having the courage to let love in again. For every butterfly, every music box melody, every moment that had led her here. The city lights twinkled below like stars brought down to earth. And in the quiet of the penthouse, with her family safe around her, Janet Washington Bradford finally allowed herself to believe what she'd thought impossible. She was home. She was whole. She was happy. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.